Hi guys, welcome back and happy Sunday. Already, god dang, where does the time go? It's already Sunday, yo. Amazing. So I thought I would do this live Q&A where you guys can pop in and ask me anything. Not that I'm going to answer everything, but you can ask me anything. Ask at your own risk though. Be very calculated in your questions. Because some questions obviously are offensive or inappropriate. And it just might get your behind blocked, okay? But this should be fun. I always get like inbox messages from random people. And I look at their profile and I'm like, how in the hell did you find me? How? What interest would you have in what I'm talking about? But I get it. I know. So I find like the biggest question that I get asked is, can you tell me about yourself? And I've already said, I find that question to be so corny, number one. It's corny. I kind of find it's off base. I get the reason why they say it though, because they just want to get to know me. I think they really want to connect, right? Because seeing how many videos that I've made, and I'm a relatively transparent person, I find it odd and disconcerting that a person would ask me to tell them about me when, hello, okay? If anything, you should tell me about you. How about that? These blood oranges actually taste like grapefruit. I'm gonna eat them raw, but I could have easily added some salt to them. Easily. And I tell you guys to turn on your post notifications. That way when I go live, you can come join in and you won't be like, oh man, I miss you. A lot of y'all be missing me. My fault. I know my lives are like very random, but still. So here's your chance to get to know more about me. I'm pretty straightforward. You know, I was actually thinking about getting me some new furniture, like a new reclining chair. Even a new couch. Given that I only had these for like a little over a year. So I moved into this place back October. Time goes by so fast. It seems like all the years are just coming together, right? Kind of lose a sense of what time, like what day it is. But I got these furniture back October 2020, right? When I first moved back to New York. And my pre-doc internship, I was working remotely from home. 80% of my work was at home. So I worked from home 4 out of 5 days out of the week. That's a lot, right? And I was sitting in my reclining chair, speaking with patients and doing psychological evaluations. And I remember telling my supervisor, I've sat in this chair for so many hours, I think I'm just going to get a new one. Not that I need a new one, but I think I'm just going to get a new chair because I just want to switch it up a bit. Because I felt like I sat in that one long enough. Maybe I'll get one that vibrates. I know they have all kind of reclining chairs, like ones that have like the seat warmer, but I don't think I need that though. The girl already get toasty. Toasty. Sometimes I feel like I'm overdressed. Really do. cold as shit yesterday. Yesterday was January 15th, MLK birthday. And I actually was out in Brooklyn yesterday, in Williamsburg, perusing around. And there was this guy that was walking across on the sidewalk, and he noticed what I was wearing, and he was like, "Oh, I love your coat." I got so many compliments, but I always do anyway, based on how I'll be dressed. Like, I get a lot of compliments from random people, white people and black people alike. And so I was like, "Thank you." And then something told me to ask him, like, where are the good restaurants in this neighborhood? Like, point me in the right direction. And he did. So there's this place, I hope I'm recalling the name of the restaurant correctly, but I believe it's called Sweet Science in Brooklyn. I went to. He recommended that place, and they, like, perfect recommendation, nice vibe. I actually went live yesterday when I was there, and I ordered some shrimp and grits, delicioso. Good service, like, it was just all around great vibe. So I most likely I will be going back there. But I like to do spontaneous things like that. Just like out of nowhere, out of the blue. Just like pick a destination in New York and go to. And oftentimes people ask me, "Oh, what are your plans?" So it'll be like Wednesday and they'll be like, "Oh, what are you planning to do this weekend?" And I'm just like, I'm spontaneous. I don't know. So I have my laptop here because I am going to read this email that I received from this guy who I actually addressed his comment in my previous video. So there has been a little bit of back and forth. His comment was the reason that I created the video on calling all black cuckolds, because he made a statement kind of assuming that there is an obsession with white male cuckolds and that there aren't any black cuckolds, male cuckolds. I'm like, of course there are, right? So I made a video response to his comment that he left on my post. And then, because he follows my Facebook page, right? And so I noticed that he's commenting on like various of my Facebook posts. And I made a post. I think this is so funny. I made a post that I said, dudes, I said, niggas be killing me, right? When they find out that I have a PhD, because they start to like change their vernacular. They start to try to use like big words, but all out of context, right? I think it's hilarious. And I made that post after, like, just first of all getting annoyed with dudes on the dating site. But I got a message from a guy on a dating site and just using like big words all out of context. And I thought it's unnecessary. Just talk regular. I can tell, like, obviously that's not how you speak. But they're trying to like adjust their language and their choice of words to, I guess, be able to relate to me when they find out I have a PhD. And I had said that, you know, it ain't really that deep. And so this guy, he follows up in a comment and he says, "Oh yeah, PhDs, what did he say?" Sometimes I be forgetting shit. I like my mind, the way my mind works, it just has a way to kind of filter out garbage or things that I feel like aren't meaningful to me. So he said something to the effect of, PhDs aren't that much or something like that, right? And so I did delete his comment because I've had this discussion before with you guys concerning the kind of general consensus. It's like a common kind of general consensus, especially amongst black men. Black men, right? Who have this thing against black female PhDs. And I'm like, baby, you got the right one, okay? I get it. It's like, okay, you devalue higher education. That's your perspective. You're entitled to your own opinion. However, when interacting with me, show some respect. Show some decorum, right? And obviously, I value higher education. If I didn't, I wouldn't have a PhD, right? So this conversation has come up before where I've addressed this in, you know, a previous video about why do black men feel intimidated by black female PhDs, and of course it attracts the attention of black men, and they blah 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 blah, like in the comment section, just pretty much being outright disrespectful. I remember one comment, black man said, "Oh, it's not that black men feel intimidated by black women with PhDs. It's that black women, what do you say? It's like black women want to receive recognition for doing basic shit. Like, oh, I got a PhD. Oh, I got an apartment. Oh, I bought a house. Oh, it's like, first of all, it's not really basic shit, right? You may think it's basic shit, right, just in general, but when you think of the context in which black people, black men and women alike, exist in, right, we forget we live in a racially oppressive society where, yeah, it is an accomplishment for hell a black man to make it past age 40 years old, past age 30, right? So to say that, to try to undermine the significance of a person's achievements, accomplishments, including getting a PhD, right, I think that it is negligent to the context in which we live in, right? And it's ignorant, shall I say the least. It's very ignorant. It's a very ignorant statement to make. Like I said, I think that, hell, a black man just graduating from high school, that's a major accomplishment. And that's why when I see videos like on social media highlighting these graduation ceremonies, just from high school, right? You think, okay, it's just graduating from high school, big deal, right? But no, it is a big deal for a black man to graduate, considering the number of high school dropouts, right? So this is where having a contextual understanding of different socio-political factors impacting the black community comes in, which they don't have that awareness of. You don't have to go to fucking school to get a higher education to know this, but this is something that you learn en route, right? Sometimes it's very telling, like when you have men that respond in that way or comment in that way on these posts, you can tell that they don't obviously have a higher education, because that's something that you learn, in school, right? Especially, you taking like social science classes, they talk about that. They talk about racial disparities, and you would think, aside from that, right, aside from what's being taught in higher education, right, in college or in graduate school programs, being a black person, you would think that you would have a degree of an awareness, right? So it just annoys me when some people are just very ignorant to the fact. I'm like, are you trolling, or what are you doing here? Just seeking attention? So I stay far away from those kinds of black men because, I feel like it's very offensive. Like, their stance is very offensive. And it shows a lot about their character and who they are, I couldn't see myself trying to devalue a black man's accomplishments, whatever it may be, right? If he has a GED, or if he has a certificate from a trade program, or whatever it may be, I'm not going to try to place less significance on that and say, oh, that's nothing, right? So for a black man to see me, to encounter me, and me having a PhD, and this was at the time when I was working towards a PhD, right? They would make these like sly statements, which I find to be very offensive. And this is just like on a social media site, Facebook, people I don't really know. And this is also even in the context of like on dating sites, and that's how I weed out those kinds of men, because you can tell, like, it's not about necessarily the education. Granted, they may say, okay, well, it's just a piece of paper from a white man, and they are opposed to the system of white supremacy and all of that. I get it from that perspective, but oftentimes it's not that. It's just they don't respect women, right? So I don't have those kinds of men in my circle, and when I get the sense that a man is speaking in that narrative, it shouts like MGTOW-ish, right? Men going their own way. It shouts that the same kind of perspective and narrative that that so-called black life coach, and everybody know who he is, right? KS, I don't like to say his name, but he kind of has the same language that he's promoting out there, and it doesn't do our race any good, let alone a gender, a species of our race. You know, it's derogatory, it's demeaning, it's inappropriate, it's offensive. So I'm going to read this email, because this email came in response to a number of things, right? One being the video response that I made on calling all black cuckolds when I addressed his comment. And then two, you know, him seeing my post that I made on black men, right? And how they try to change their choice of words to relate to me as a PhD. And I said that, you know, in that same post, that it ain't really that deep. It being the fact that they have to change their speech, right? Not the PhD. The PhD is a big deal, right? I'm not going to sit up here and invest. Like, who invests so much time and energy towards attaining our credential and it doesn't mean anything, right? So if it doesn't mean anything to you, then keep that shit to yourself, right? But I'm going to read you guys his comments. So he says, first, I want to say thank you for responding to my question and making a video. It answered and cleared up certain aspects of my question relating to cuckolding, right? Then he says, I also want to say sorry for suggesting obtaining a PhD is not that impressive. So first of all, I don't really need anyone's approval. I think that y'all should know me by now. Hi, hello, how are you? And this is really early in the morning. I think it's what, 9:19. I started this video I think at 9 a.m. Good morning, Adamoye. So over there it is what, 3 in Nigeria, 3:19 in Nigeria. So he says, I also want to say sorry for suggesting obtaining a PhD is not that impressive. What I meant to say was that today degrees like PhDs and MBAs have lost their value. So I would like to address this, right? Just this part where he says that today degrees like PhDs and MBAs have lost their value. Now there is a kind of going statement that, you know, getting a higher degree is a waste of time, given that there are a significant number of degree holders without employment, right? And they're probably on unemployment, right? But to make a blanket statement to say that PhDs and MBAs have lost their value, substantiate that. I feel like, you know, you can't just go by certain things that you hear, because when you think about it, there are a significant number of PhD holders, right, MBAs that are in their chosen field, right? Like they're working in their study, their chosen field of study, and they have lucrative salaries, including myself, right? So I always used to say this, even like when I remember like getting my bachelor's degree, right? And a lot of you guys don't know, but I graduated from college at the age of 22 back in 2006. We are in 2022, right? So we're talking about a significant time span, right? I'm not new at getting a degree, first of all. I'm new at getting my PhD. I graduated with my PhD last year in 2021. But it's definitely been a long time coming. And I remember even working towards my bachelor's, like this whole narrative. This is nothing new. There's nothing new under the sun, right? So the whole narrative of, oh, you know, you can have a degree, but that doesn't mean anything, you know, doesn't mean that you're guaranteed a job. This was something that was being said back then, right? We're talking about over 16 years ago, right? This was being said, and I've always made a conscious reminder to myself, right, and an effort that, okay, that doesn't apply to me, right? Because it's really about how you work it. And a lot of people get degrees, right, and they feel like, okay, jobs are supposed to fall out the sky. I mean, not taking into account that we live in a very competitive society that's rooted in capitalism, right? So considering that, yeah, you have to kind of sell yourself, right? And applying for jobs or a position within a company or agency, you have to, okay, yes, be mindful, okay, and appreciate and hold value to yourself that, yeah, you work hard for your degree, and know what your worth is and what your value is, but also be mindful of that there are other people like just like you, if not have a stronger standing in the market than you, based on a lot of characteristics that really have nothing to do, with a person's viability in a certain position, including race, right? Race plays a major role. And so I'm glad that he sent this email, because it gives me an opportunity to kind of address some things that maybe you guys really don't know about me, but I have written about in my autobiography called American Dreamer, which I will be releasing. I know I keep saying soon, right? It's a long time coming, because I started writing that book back in 2009. I finished it in 2010. But I held off on publishing that book, releasing it for political reasons. Wanted to make sure certain things were in place, because it is a politically driven book. But it's like race being an important factor, given I was born and raised in Jacksonville, Florida. That's the southeastern part of the United States. Anybody know anything about the South, right? Now, granted, there's racism all over the U.S., but it looks differently, right? Feels differently depending on where you are in the U.S. The South is one of the most racist regions. Like, you can feel the racism vibrating in the air. You can feel it. You can smell it when you're in the South, which means that, yes, especially during that time when I was graduating, with my bachelor's, and actually, I must say this to my own credit, that when I graduated my bachelor's degree, right, back in 2006, I was offered a full-time position, like, right away, in my hometown. So I graduated from Florida State University with honors, and that's a school in Tallahassee. And then, my hometown was, 2.5, 3 hours away from there, and I ended up getting a full-time position, like immediately after I graduated, right? So I already had a plan set up. That was my plan. And I did that. And I also went directly into a master's degree program following that, right? All in the same year. Started a full-time job working at a residential treatment facility that was locked down, that housed wards of the state of Florida, ages, I think, 5 to 18 years old. I worked on a boy unit. It's interesting. I tend to just work with males in these treatment facilities that I work in. So that was like my very first job post-bachelor's, right? Meanwhile, I also was pursuing a master's degree full-time. So I had my plate full. I was living like minutes away from the beach, like 10, 15 minutes away from the beach. Had a 2-bedroom apartment, doing my thing, right? But then shit happens, which like I said, I talk about this in my book, American Dreamer, and I got a chance to really get smacked dead in the face with racism, right? Like this structural system of racism to see, like, okay, how it really plays out. When you hear about things being racist, and people don't really quite understand racism, and I find it quite funny when we have, white men oftentimes, resort to the idea of advocating for interracial relationships with a cuckold dynamic, assuming that is going to fix racism, and clearly they don't understand what racism is, right? It's a structural oppressive system, shall we say system, right? It has really little to do with white people liking or disliking black people, right? It's about power and control. And so, yeah, going back to my experience in Florida and being able to maintain and get a job that, right, is suitable for me, right? I had some issues with that. Like, after graduating, obviously from Florida State University, I was able to secure a job. But, that ended up coming to an end. I worked that job for like a year and some change, and that came to an end. It was just difficult. It was really, I struggled. It was like my struggle phase. I struggled, right, to get a job, not only in Florida. I moved to Atlanta, Georgia, and to secure a job within the field of mental health. And this is when I'm holding a bachelor's degree. Very difficult, right? So people ask me oftentimes, why did I make the move to New York? Opportunity. Hello. I tell people this all the time, that racism, of course, yes, it's here, but I don't feel it. I don't feel it like I felt it in the South. And when I moved to New York back in 2014, I just felt like embraced. I felt invited and welcomed with open arms. And just opportunities just bursting like left and right. And I still feel the same way. I still have the same sentiment as it relates to just New York City compared to other places, which I'm going to get into another question that I get asked often relating to LA versus New York. But there's a lot of opportunities here. I feel like there's no excuse for people to be unemployed, right? So I think it just depends on geographically where you are when it comes to the value of a degree, right? Like you were saying, PhDs and MBAs. Depends on where the hell you are. A PhD, and also what does the PhD in, right? So I've been on many of live videos where the talk comes up, where people are trying to make comparisons of different types of PhDs, right? And of course, psychology usually comes part of the discussion. It's like, and it's often said the degree in psychology doesn't mean anything, and that's, it depends on how you work it, right? And then there are other disciplines that come up. What is a degree in history going to do, for example, or a degree in English, and like any degree that basically is couched within the area of humanities, right, or social sciences, which psychology would fall under that. Depending though, sometimes they kind of classify psychology within the arts and sciences, or humanities or social sciences, right? But they're basically trying to make the statement to say that degrees that are housed within humanities, which that would include like anthropology, psychology, they're saying that, it doesn't mean anything, it doesn't hold much weight, as opposed to degrees that are more science-based, right? Like engineering and math, they're saying that, that holds more weight. And granted, when you think of what's happening in our society, and you think of the fields that are very lucrative, for example, technology, right? You see like the many advancements that we have in science and technology. Obviously there's money in that, but there's money in a lot of different fields, not just in science and technology. So I get where they're coming from in that respect, but I've met a lot of engineers, I've dated engineers, and just because you have a degree in engineering doesn't mean that you're going to have this lucrative salary and this very plush life. Like, no. It just depends. So I think it depends on a number of factors. It depends on where you live. It depends on you as a person. Like, are you a go-getter, right? Like, you can have this, and you can have two people, right? Both of us can have PhDs in psychology, but our career trajectory, our life trajectory will look completely different because we're different people, right? How I work a degree in psychology may be different from how somebody else worked their own degree, right? We're different. Even when I look at my cohort of my other colleagues, my other classmates who I was in the training program with, my doctoral training program, we have our pathways are so different, right? Some of us work in community settings, and community psychology, it pays, but not as well as, let's say, if you're working in for a state facility, or if you're working in a hospital, or working for the federal government, right? I work for the government. So it just looks different, right? And that's going to reflect upon how much you're making in your lifestyle, inevitably. So to make this blanket statement to say, PhD doesn't hold value, I feel like that is reductionistic, and it doesn't take into account like the many other variables that factor into, the value of a person's credential. I'm thinking about this engineer. I've dated actually a few engineers, and it sounds good, like, he's an engineer, right? You think like engineers would be well paid, but it really just depends on what type of engineering, and if they even were able to secure a job, especially as a black person in that field because it's very competitive. But I have to agree with him though to this point of the commercialization of college. I mean, as an entrepreneur myself, right, I'm very business minded, and I'm aware, yes, that everything in our society, everything is commercialized. Everything is rooted in capitalism, even college, even healthcare. I work in healthcare, right, especially being a doctor, right? They train us to make diagnoses. Otherwise, there's no reimbursement, right? Now, I get paid regardless, right? But just in the managed care system of how it's structured, they teach us, okay, like let's say if I wanted to go into private practice, then yeah, this would be necessary. Like you would have to make a diagnosis basically on the first day that you see a patient for insurance reimbursement purposes, right? If you want to get paid, essentially, that's within the context of private practice. Now, I don't work in private practice, at least not right now, but that's just how it's set up. That's just the reality of the beast, right? So I definitely get the whole commercialization of college, of all industries, education being included. He says, I know you are into bulls and being dominated. Now, I'm trying to figure out where from that last video that I made when I said calling all black bulls, did he get the impression that I am into bulls? So I feel like a lot of times you guys really misinterpret me. You misread me. You have a degree in philosophy? Okay. So my degree obviously is a PhD is a philosophy, but then there is a specialization attached to that. Mine is in clinical psychology. You cannot be a clinical psychologist, right? License. You're a doctor at that point. Without, having a higher degree. There are certain professions that require a PhD, right? A higher degree to practice in it. And then not only that, licensure, right? So yes, I feel a certain kind of way when people try to undermine my credential. They don't, first of all, know, they don't understand what it takes. You don't know all the hard work that it took for me to even just attain a PhD, right? Let alone to be licensed. Licensure is a whole separate beast, right? So getting the PhD is through an educational institution, right? And my program was 5 years, as is a lot of PhD programs in clinical psychology. That is accredited by the American Psychological Association, APA. It's very intense, very involved. Like, you go through so many layers, jumping through all these hoops, y'all. So many supervisors, so many meetings, presentations, research papers, seeing patients for free, shall I mention, right? Different clinical rotations where you have to commit to a certain number of hours each and every year of the program. All of that while you're working towards the degree. Those clinical hours, you're not getting paid for it, right? But that's kind of like a test to see, okay, well, how much do you really want to do this, right? Because a lot of motherfuckers ain't built for that shit. It's just like, I can't do it. Can't, right? Because we're talking about, this is mental health here. We're talking about working in psychiatric settings with people who have severe mental illness, y'all. This is not for the weak-hearted. And then licensure is a separate beast because that requires a postdoc, which I am doing now, which consists of a certain number of hours, clinical hours, and supervised hours, right, of training. Going back to his blanket statement of PhDs, MBAs losing their value, I have to toot my horn a little bit to say that my salary has tripled from pre-doc internship. Pre-doc is basically the final year of my doctoral program, right? That's what I just completed last September 2021, and that was for 1 full year. So from September 2020 to September 2021, I was working on my pre-doc internship. So when you look at my salary, right, my salary when I was working my pre-doc internship compared to my salary now, which I am in postdoc. Postdoc is basically just me working after my doctoral degree has been conferred. I have my degree in hand, right? It's been conferred. And I'm working a postdoc, which is a requirement en route to licensure as a psychologist. That's where I am at now. My salary has tripled, shall I say that. When I get licensed, which will be, I will be licensed this time next year. Most likely I'll be licensed at the end of this year, right? Because I already applied for licensure and everything. It's just a matter of checking off the boxes. But when I get my license in hand, my salary is going to double. So I laugh, like I said, I made a post about this on Facebook. I laugh when people say that, oh, it's just a piece of paper. I'm like, okay. Tell my fucking bills that. Tell my my bank account that it's just a piece of paper. But yeah, you have a lot of people that have degrees and are not working in the field, right? It's like, and that makes me question, like, were they really committed to that field of study? Like me, nah. Yo, I started studying psychology. I knew when I chose psychology, and I have to say this. My initial major in college was not psychology, it was computer science. And even before going to college, I actually got sworn into the U.S. military. That's a separate story. I'm not going to get into that. But I got sworn into the military. Never had plans on going. I just got sworn in. I always planned to go to college, right? Because I always, value education. And I always been smart. It's just, to be frank, I always, was an honor roll student, making straight A's or AB honor roll. And my initial major was computer science because, of course that's a lucrative field, right? But I got tired of just like the monotony of just sitting in front of a computer and learning those programs. It got played out to me. I wanted to enter into a field of study that was more exciting, more interesting, and psychology is that for me. And so I changed my major from computer science to psychology after my first semester, I think, or probably during at the end of my first semester. I'm like, nah, this ain't it. Computer science ain't it. Though I mean, it was interesting, like the learning the programming, right, and it kind of builds upon like the previous lesson, but I'm focused. I have laser focus, and I have like the attention span to be able to sit there and do it. But the question is, did I want to do that, right? Do I see a career in that? Hell fuck no. I changed my major to psychology, and I enrolled in my first psychology class, Intro to Psychology, and I remember my professor was just, I liked her personality, and I liked the way, I liked her passion for it, right? So I think that plays a major role. The fact that she was like really passionate and enthused about the subject area, it made me enthused about it, right? And, or I would say contributed to my enthusiasm. So I knew right then, like, yeah, this is what I want to do. And taking, different psychology courses, psychology is a very vast, it's very broad field. It's different types of psychologists, right? There's forensic psychology, which that's somewhat the field I'm tapering on, right? I'm a clinical psychologist, but I'm also doing forensic work because some of my patients have current and past criminal histories, and so there is some involvement with the court. and forensic analysis. So that's part of the work that I do. But then you also have like child psychology, geropsychology. You have neuropsychology. Now, some of my work is also on the lines of neuropsychology because I do neuropsychological assessments with the patients I work with. So there is a lot of overlap in the field of psychology, but there are disciplines that stand on their own and they're separate. So I knew that I wanted to be a clinical psychologist because I knew that I wanted to work with clients and patients and, understand the why of behavior and analyzing human behavior. I appreciated that dynamic, like, of a therapy session. So I've always been committed to this, right? You have people that, they take psychology classes and they learn like, oh no, they thought it was easy, number one. And they say, oh, I chose psychology because they thought it was easy. It sounds easy, right? Oh, you're just studying human behavior. No, it's not as easy as one may think. And a lot of people change their majors from psychology to other things. But I think that's important, like making sure you choose a field of study that you are committed to. Because I think that does play out into your ability to be able to develop and sustain a career, in that field, right? So you won't be one of those PhD holders or whatever degree holder you are, and you're holding this degree that you work so hard for, but you're not even working in that field. What sense does that make? It makes none at all. I knew this is what I wanted to do, and I remain committed to that path, and here I am. But yeah, going back, he says, I know you're into bulls and being dominated. Like, where did he get I'm into bulls from? I'm trying to figure out. Where did he get that idea that I'm into bulls? Like, just totally misinterpret things that I say. But sometimes it's kind of annoying. Like, I'm like, y'all need to slow down and listen to what I'm saying. Don't just read the title of the video, right? When I say calling out bulls, right, as a title, and then you just like, oh, you automatically assume that I'm into black bulls. I'm not opposed to them, right? But it's not like I have a fascination with black men who fuck the wives or female partners of other men. Like, in fact, that wouldn't be my go-to choice, because I would look at that as like for me, sex is sacred, right? So in seeing that, I'm very calculated. I'm very careful about who I lie down with, which I've been abstinent for over the past year. But I'm very particular about that, like stuff like that. So I can talk openly and freely about these sexual activities and alternative lifestyles. Doesn't mean I'm out here just loosey-goosey, like wilding out. Hell no. I'm very guarded over my energy. That should be very apparent. I'm very careful when it comes to things like that. Even like when it comes to who I'm talking to on the phone, like to the point of talking with a guy, having an exchange with a guy, let's say on a dating app, and the question as to whether or not we should transition this to like a phone conversation. Like, I'm very like, you'll see, like even the guys will say like, yo, you picky. I won't say I'm picky, I'm just very selective. Like, no. We have to be compatible. If we're meant for each other, we are. But I can see a lot of guys, like, they're just not my type. It is not going to work. I'm not attracted to you. I'm not attracted to you. It has to be something aside from your physicality, but something within you, like spiritually, that resonates with me, right? That I can feel safe enough to say, okay, well, let's transition this conversation from the dating app to over the phone. Which I have had, several of those, or probably many of those, right? There's a lot of interesting guys, contrary to popular belief, that, are on these dating sites. This video gonna be longer than what I thought, right? I have a lot to say. I actually was going to address a question about my most memorable dating experience, but if I run out of time, I'll just make this a part 2. But yeah, I've dated, of course, I've been on like a lot of different dates with guys, and it's after having to exchange, contact information and feeling comfortable getting to know that guy. It's a lot of professionals on a dating app, right? I've met attorneys, doctors, medical doctors, that is, even PhDs, engineers. Like, I've made videos about it, dating an engineer versus dating a doctor, a medical doctor. So this was back in LA. That was interesting. But yeah, I think what kind of, and it's some different things that messes it up, I would say, when it comes to like these encounters that I have with these guys and dating. It's like things go well up until a certain point. All right, but moving along, he says, I know you are into bulls and being dominant. Yes, I'm into domination. You got that right. But into bulls, no. I look at bulls, like I look at black men who are bulls, they just like to fuck. What's so fascinating about a man that just be carelessly throwing his dick around into different women? That's not my, no. But domination, yes, I do like that dynamic, right, of being dominated. And I've talked about this in more detail, like in more depth, especially when I was back in LA. I made a lot of videos, I think, on BDSM. I have a whole playlist, actually, so if you would like to, you can see those videos on my YouTube channel. Just look for the playlist entitled BDSM Vlogs. And I talk about that. I talk about, being spanked and the psychological underpinnings of domination for me and being disciplined physically. He says, but you are also into polyandry, which I find conflicting because, as you said, you are mainly attracted to black men and they get jealous. So I wonder if you were to make a utopia sex life, what would it look like? Okay, so I see what he's saying, because I read this at first and I'm like, how does that conflict? How is black men, right, who are bulls, how would that conflict with the idea of polyandry? Because I can see black bulls being interested in polyandry. I think, like, people, when they listen to me speak, they're not listening critically. They're just, I don't know how they listen, but they're not listening with a listening ear. They're just like, I don't know, hearing me talk. But think about what I said, though. I didn't mention the jealous aspect, and we were talking about cuckolding, right? The likelihood that a heterosexual alpha male type of black man would be involved in cuckolding. Being a cuckold and being a bull are two different things, right? So the cuckold is a man who, as I described it, becomes cuckold by default, right? When his female partner or wife, is sexually pleased by outside men, right? Other men. That's what makes him a cuckold. The bull is the man who comes in to sexually satisfy the female partner in that relationship dynamic. Those are two different positions. Those are two different roles, right? Being the bull versus being the kind of, I would say, more so submissive, clearly open-minded, cuckold man. I was going to say white man, because typically cuckolds are white men. So the question came up that he asked, prior, was, are there any black male cuckolds, right? That's a different question than the bulls, right? So it's like, I see that you're into bulls and being dominated, but you're also into polyandry, which I find conflicting. It's not really conflicting. In fact, I would say that black bulls are more likely to consent to a polyandrous relationship than I would say black men being willing to consent to being a cuckold, right? So that's interesting, though. because this came up before when I made a video on, I'm into polyandry. People don't know what the fuck that is. They think it's just like, oh, it's a woman that want to have sex with a bunch of men, right? Multiple men. And I just find that to be like very simplistic way of thinking about this. But of course, a lot of men's mind, they can't think outside of sex, right? It's just, for them, it's just sexually related, sexually based. But it's deeper than sex. It's a concept that I haven't even began to really unfold here with you guys, because y'all ain't ready for that, right? Like, you don't see things, you don't see life through that lens. So we can only keep it at that surface level of talking about like sexual activities. But for me, I definitely wouldn't be attracted to polyandry for the sex. That's not why I'm drawn to that. In fact, polyandry is just one form of polygyny, right? Or polygamy, shall I say. Polygamy basically is like the umbrella, and then you have polygyny, and then you have polyandry, right? So polygyny is where there's a man who has multiple wives. Polyandry is pretty much the same thing, but the reverse, where the woman has multiple husbands. Shall we say husbands, right? We're not talking about sex partners, right? Then you have polyamory, where yes, that is about sex, right? Just having multiple sexual partners. And hey, you do you. There's no judgment zone here. But let's be clear, though, when we're having interactions and when you guys are communicating with me, let's be clear to make sure that we are on the same page so you're not misperceiving what I'm saying. I have no interest in a polyamorous relationship, but yeah, I said I would be open to polyandry. And that, like I was saying, the question came up was, oh, what kind of man? Because they know that, my viewers know that I prefer alpha men. Right? And they're like, what kind of man? Alpha man would not be consenting to that. So I think that's what you're talking about here. The alpha man, right? And I think you're saying being dominated, and being dominated kind of implies that it will be by an alpha dominant man. How would that work with a polyandrous relationship? That's the question, right? That's where you're saying that it's conflicting. It seems conflicting. So you're not the first that has expressed that. There, other people have said the same thing, right? If I am into being dominated, that would mean by, a dominant alpha black man. But I'm also into polyandry. How can we marry those two worlds, right? And in my mind, I say easily, right? Nothing is beyond one's ability to be able to accomplish. That's just the way my mind works. And so, especially in seeing like the way there is a kind of a new wave, right, of an emerging group of black men. I mean, people in general, I should say, but yeah, we're talking about black men here, who are like considering different alternative ways, right? I know that there is some malleability within the human mind, first of all, clearly being, a person who studies psychology. Yeah, people are kind of stuck in their ways, but people are also, there's a space within our existence, right? Our way of being, and even within our belief system, that there's some flexibility there, right? There are, shall I say, curiosity to want to explore. And so banking upon that, I think that's how this type of dynamic would be possible. Because you just explore the inhibitions, right, that are getting in the way of a black man, stepping into this type of dynamic. I've had conversations with black men on dating app, right, where on my profile it indicates that polyandry is one of my interests, and so this is something that has started a conversation, between myself and, black men on this dating app, and they're curious. It's like you can tell initially, right, before having had this encounter with me, like they have been, opposed to like polyandry, hell nah. And in their mind, their go-to is thinking like, a threesome, right? Where it's 2 men and myself, right? And I don't want to be exposing myself to another man or see another man's penis. Like, oh, no, right? So that's what kind of comes to mind. But then taking the time to really think deeply about this dynamic, then they see that, okay, there are other benefits, right? And there are other manifestations of how this could play out outside of the bedroom, right? So I would love to have that conversation with you guys here, right, on a public platform. I would say no, preferably like in a private kind of platform, private room, which is possible. I can create a private Facebook group where I do live videos in there, and only people who are part of that private Facebook group will be able to see those live videos. So and be able to participate actively in those live discussions. So that's an idea. If you're interested, feel free to inbox me, and I can add you to the group. I haven't created the group yet, but it's a thought, right? So I would love to be able to entertain that kind of conversation to further explore that dynamic, because I do see that Black men are curious and just like, what would that look like? But yeah, it's getting to know me, and I think I've made this clear that like I am a Pan-African. A lot of people don't know what the fuck that is, right? But you can look at my influences and see like what that is. One of my biggest influences is Dr. Umar Johnson. Not to say I agree with everything he says, but I do agree with a lot that he says. So I'm definitely about my people, uniting Black people, and promoting the advancement of African people across the diaspora, especially African Americans, or like they say, foundational Black Americans. So that if you think about that, right, then you can see how that may tie into this idea of polyandry, and it not really being sex-based, but being more politically based. Can y'all read between the lines? All right. Moving along. Oh, he says, if you were to make a utopia sex life, what would it look like? So for me, it's not about creating a sex life, right? It's about creating a legacy, a life, right? That includes a legacy, and building. That's what it's about, building. But yeah, sex is a part of that, of course, And I have fantasized. I've talked about this before, where I have fantasized about what it would be like to, have, intercourse with more than one man, right? Hell yeah, that shit would be nice, right? That's nice, especially if they know what they're doing. Because just because motherfucker having sex don't mean they know what they're doing, right? A lot of men don't know, and I feel like they know what they're doing in their own way, right? But in terms of sexually satisfying me or appealing to me, I have certain things that turn me on, and it's really intellectually based, with an undertone, obviously, of respect and reverence. A lot of men don't have that. Like, you can't teach a man how to respect a woman, right? You can't teach a man loyalty. All right, those things just are naturally inherent within a man, right? And being able to pick upon that man's energy to feel like, okay, he genuinely has this respect and reverence towards a woman. You can tell men who have mommy issues because it shows up in their interpersonal relationships with women, right? You can tell. Like, you need that, and that shows a sign of immaturity. You need to go and work on that relationship first with the very first woman that you came into contact with, which would be your mother. Work on that, and then try to pursue a relationship with a woman. You ain't ready for a relationship with a woman if you got mommy issues, right? Because it manifests itself, right? And they're so fucking needy. These kind of men are very needy. They're disrespectful to her. They have this like animosity and hatred, and they may come off as like, oh, hey beautiful, hey queen, but the slightest moment they get a little bit triggered, switch. It's like, damn, where did this come from? Where did this come from? I expressed my difference of opinion towards this one guy I was talking to from the dating app, right? Jamaican guy he lives in Queens, and he had made a joke. He said it was a joke initially, right? I don't play like that. But I was in Brooklyn, and he checking in, see how what I was doing. And I was like, I'm out in Brooklyn. I did some shopping. I'm about to grab me some food. He was like, oh, can you bring me some? No, I don't know you. We have never met. No. And then, so he was kind of like pressing it, right? He was like, oh, come on, da 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 da. I'm just like, no. And then after kind of going back and forth, he was like, oh, I'm just playing. So who carries a joke on for that long, right? But anyway, either way, you playing or not, I don't play like that. And no, to me, that's a turnoff. I had to be honest with him, right? So he was like, call me when you get home. I didn't call him when I got home. But he called me like a few days later after that, right? And he was checking in. He was like, well, I'm kind of, upset because you didn't call me. I was like, well, honestly, I lost interest in you. And I was turned off by that. That to me is not attractive. Like, we don't know each other, right? We're getting to know each other. Some men got it. Some men got the gift of gab. They say all the right things. And some men, they just don't know what to say. They have very poor, weak-ass pickup lines. They say things that just aren't the right thing to say to a woman, But they should learn through trial and error, you would think, right? If they have a brain. But they don't, right? And they do the same, they repeat the same thing and wonder why, like, it doesn't work out, in relationships. But, yeah, I told him I was just straight to the point, and he had called and it was just like, yeah, I thought you were going to call me the other day when you got home. I was like, yeah, I lost interest. I'm not. He was like, are you kidding me? And he made it like about him. He was like, oh, well, I'm disappointed that, like, no, I don't care about what the fuck, how you feel. Like, I'm telling you, this is how I felt in that moment or how I feel right now. And I'm turned the fuck off. I'm not, like, you can't make me be interested in you again because I'm just turned off. I lost interest, which I tend to do very easily. Cause men, and it's not all men, cause I know some of y'all, all men. Of course, it's not all men, but y'all be getting besides y'allself. You gotta get back to the old school way of being, right? Where is chivalry? Where is opening the doors? Where is just having like a degree of respect and reverence towards a woman? You don't think that you like entitled. Men be feeling entitled and shit like that. Like, no. And you want a woman to submit. Ain't no woman submitting to that shit. I'm not submitting to that. No. You take the lead as a man. I'm more very traditional, old school in my thinking. Right? And so, I know there are men out there that subscribe to that way of being. And they know and how to treat a woman. Right? Because they've been raised well by a good woman. And so he gets upset and just, he gets upset. He hung up because he couldn't bear the frustration, right? Which to me is a telltale sign. Because I have those times where I kind of test the guy just to see, right? Doesn't mean that it was a deal breaker for me that he asked me to bring him food. I was turned off, but I didn't say like I'm done. Just because I didn't call him didn't mean that I cut him off, right? But in his mind, that's how he dealt with it. So he's all upset and in his emotions, and that, like I said, the telltale sign, ain't the kind of person I want to deal with anyway. Because number one, you don't know how to resolve conflict. This is your way. You're having a fucking pity party. You're acting like a goddamn baby. He hangs up. Then he like goes on his fucking tirade and start to message me and all these fucking disrespectful ass text messages. Oh, you bitch and da 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 da. Oh, okay. Now it comes out. Thank you for showing your ass. Okay. Makes it very easy to weed out motherfuckers, right? And that's what I be trying to see, because you don't know this person, right? This is online that you don't know these people. But there, you want to see, okay, who was this person, right? Because a person can portray themselves, which of course most men do, portray themselves, well put together, clean shaven, right? You work and you live alone and all looks good. Okay, but what is the reason why you're single? As a man, because like y'all want to say, oh, men have it good. Men is a higher ratio of women to men. So that's such a high ratio, right? You got all these options. Why the fuck your ass single? Yeah, ain't no one want to deal with that bullshit. But anyway, he says, I am curious about cuckolding and I'm open-minded and your videos are enlightening. But all because I'm interested in alternative lifestyle doesn't mean I am gay. Who said that you're gay? What the fuck? Why are you sitting up here automatically just volunteering that information when that wasn't even a topic of discussion about being gay? But listen, that made me wonder. Don't it make you wonder? He talking about the videos are enlightening, but because I'm interested in alternative lifestyle doesn't mean I am gay. That shit's so random. I'm gonna randomly volunteer that information. That's so random. Who the fuck knows you gay? Where you get that from? But listen, you gay, you gay. A lot of men are gay. They have gay tendencies. Let's say bisexual, right? But even with that, like, because society teaches men, right, that you're supposed to be attracted to, women. That's the way to go, right? For, natural causes, right? Procreation. But a lot of men really, they don't want to be with a woman. They crave a man. Maybe not at the point when they were born that they were homosexual, right? Maybe they were born heterosexual, right? But different life experiences have kind of like, geared them in a different direction. Early life experiences too, especially as it relates to their mom. And then they end up craving male energy, right? Maybe because, they didn't have that male presence in their life. Or maybe they did, but it wasn't nurturing, right? And it didn't really provide the structure, the discipline that they need. So they crave that, from an adult man. So be it. Shit. But then they're like, I'm not gay. Okay, you're not gay, but you just crave male energy for a certain time period in your life. Okay. But so fuck what if you are? Like, they just want to be perceived in a certain light. Like, when are people going to get past that? I think that speaks to where they are developmentally. A man can be, I don't know how old this man is right here, but he looks like he probably in his 30s, right? Maybe early 30s. Like, yo, you in your fucking 30s and you still seeking validation and approval? Fuck what people think. Listen, you gay, you gay. But whatever. He says he's not. I'm curious on what your ideal dynamic would be. I know he's probably going to watch this, but yo, like, he's expressing some curiosity in my, views on what kind of lifestyle I would like to create. I think I've already made that clear. Share your own, though. I think that's where the focus should be, right? What is your desire? Get to know yourself. A lot of y'all don't even know yourself, and you repress your sexual desires and your proclivities. You like repress that, right? Because there's this societal voice in your head saying, oh, don't do this, right? And, filtered also or influenced also by your upbringing, right? What you were taught, by your caregivers, whoever raised you. A lot of people, are religious or whatever, so subscribing to these religious doctrines, they've been indoctrinated a certain way. So it's like that voice kind of overpowers their inherent desire, right? And they have this internal struggle. They're wrestling with themselves. Because on one hand, they do want to experience the male energy. They being men, right? Want to experience the male energy, the force. That's why they play around and say, oh, well, I want to try being penetrated, right? Sexually stimulated anally by a female partner. That's just like the baby step way of exploring, like the real thing, and play around. That's the reason why, like, my videos, you look at my videos, right, the ones where we talk about alternative sexual lifestyle, is very alternative, It goes against the grain of what society says is the right thing. And so when you're in this arena and you've made it to my videos, I'm not saying that you're gay, but I think maybe we need to come up with different labels, right? Just say sexually fluid. You're sexually fluid. Which means that, you know, it's not about being gay, straight, or homosexual, or whatever, transgender. It's just about being free and open to other possibilities than their typical norm. Alright. I think this is a full hour, over an hour now. I'll wrap it up with these few questions here. So, how did I pass time during the pandemic? I actually painted. I like to walk, so I walk a lot throughout the city. I live in Upper East Side, and I find myself just walking different directions, right? So I'll go further east to the river, and I'll go north towards Harlem, or I'll even go like, you know, east to the river and then walk south where I'm walking past the United Nations and all those hospitals down there. Or I'll walk like west towards Central Park, walk through the park, walk towards Midtown, end up in Chelsea neighborhood. I'll be all over the place. But I love to walk, and I'm very grateful that this borough, and even just across New York City altogether, is very scenic. You know, so you can walk 3 miles and not even realize it, right? Because it's just like so much distractions and sights to see and people you encounter, and it's just like so vibrant. I like that. So sorry for walking though. Yeah, I took to painting back in October. Yeah, so damn, time go by so fucking fast, yo. It's just like with this pandemic happening, like I said, it's sometimes like it's made us to lose track, right? Because it's almost like a whole year things were shut down, even over a year, but like the year like 2020, shit was shut down. That's when I moved back to New York, April 2020. I keep reminding myself that. Time go by so fast, right? It's like, damn, where did time go? And so I end up moving into this place October 2020. And then that's when I started painting. I remember inviting a good friend of mine over. He's from Gambia, but he lives here in New York in the Bronx. And I don't invite people to my shit like that, but he's one of the 2 people that I have invited since I've been here, right? He came in, he's looking at it, he's like, oh, it's nice, but it's like the White House. I'm just like, what? So I do have like exposed brick in my place, but then the other walls are white, and that's before I had all this color that I added to my place, right? And it's just something the way he said, like, oh, you have the White House. I'm just like, nah. I gotta add color. And so I just took to painting. It's something I always wanted to do because I was inspired by other, like, people who paint on social media and Instagram. And I'm like, damn, I want to do that. And I never did it. And I went and got some materials. And I'm like, I was upset that I hadn't started sooner. I'm just like, I should have been doing this, right? I went crazy, and I think I counted the number of paintings I have all together that I painted since October 2020. 72 paintings, mostly African centered. How did I choose between LA versus New York? That was I would say it was a difficult but easy decision. It was difficult because I was in LA. And I know before I moved to LA, I had already had my mindset that I was going to be returning back to New York City. Given that most of my things, like I had storage units here still in New York when I was living out in LA. So I'm like, okay, I knew I was coming back. I knew that I was going to LA to do my doctoral studies, and I will be back here in New York. But then, of course, after getting to LA and experiencing it, you know, I'm just like, okay. It's different. It's much slower, which I didn't really like. I didn't appreciate the slowness of it. It reminded me a lot of Florida. Just real laid back, the palm trees, the nice weather. But just too slow to the point where I feel like kind of bored sometimes. But I always found shit to do. And I did like the entertainment aspect of it, you know, with the red carpet premiere. So I was a part of that scene. I did film school out there, so that was fun. Just met, you know, interesting people out there, like directors, writers, actors, all of that good stuff. And I felt like, okay, it's something here in LA for me, right? Like, aside from, of course, working on my PhD, aside from that, like, it's something. Granted, I'm a writer, right? I have stories, yo. I have stories. I just haven't, like, released them, published them, or produced them, but I have stories. So, yeah, I know I'm gonna be back. But I also miss New York, too. Like, even when I was in LA, I made a conscious effort to come back and visit New York, like, on an annual basis. So I did that. Just, yeah, I miss New York. Damn, I miss New York, man. No place like New York. When you live in New York, and you go other places, like, damn, there's no place like it. It's just, I think New York, like, raises your vibration. Takes you just to a whole nother level of consciousness. So many variety of people here and experiences, and yeah, I just miss that. It feels challenging, right? But challenging in a good way. It's like you're not going to be the same after moving here to New York. You're definitely not going to be the same. It's gonna toughen you up, right? Make you a stronger person, make you smarter. I feel like make you more on your toes. You know, you think faster, you speak faster. You know, it's just it changes you, and I appreciated that aspect of New York, and I also missed it when I was out in LA. Like I say, like everybody out there smoke. My colleagues, my psychiatrist on my team, my social worker, you know, we were having a conversation last week, and they're like, you know, how's LA? And I'm just like, shit, it's laid back. And everybody smoke, you know. Everybody out there, you know, be getting high and shit, just sluggish, kind of vibe, which I didn't really appreciate that. But yeah, I feel like it was easy decisions. I was like, yeah, I miss New York. I'm going back. And there's opportunities here. There's opportunities there too. So I think that was a kind of difficult part of the decision between LA and New York, career-wise, right? Not necessarily like my personal life, right? Because I know, like personally, you know, I prefer to be in New York, but career-wise, I was like, damn, should I stay in LA, California? Because there are a lot of job opportunities here, and like working with the state. Because my last clinical position was I was working at a prison, a state prison there. And my supervisor would always try to like motivate me, like real, you know, keep me in. It's like, you know, get a state job, work at the prisons. He was telling me about all these different prisons, you know, up and down California, and the pay. The pay, okay. Oh, so he was showing me like these job postings for psychologists who are not licensed, right? Which would be the postdoc, you know, position, right? After you get your degree. We're like $108,000 we're talking about, right? Unlicensed, right? So, you know this shit is going to go up once you get licensed. And this is starting pay that many different prisons across California were offering. That sounds pretty promising. Like, that's pretty convincing, right? So I was thinking about that, but then of course there are a lot of opportunities here in New York. Like New York is a big hub for mental health jobs. Very expansive industry here in mental health. A lot of hospitals, right? A lot of psychiatric hospitals and just general hospitals that have a psychiatric like department. And it's just New York, right? So I chose New York. Alright, real quick, I'm about to end this. So, favorite places to go in New York. Another question was most memorable dating experience. I don't think I have time to address that, so I will address that in its own separate video, because that probably is going to be very lengthy. Deal breakers in a relationship. I have already made a video on that, so you guys can check that video out. whole video I made on deal breakers and turn-offs and pet peeves in dating. Favorite places to go in New York. And then the other one is travel plans. I think I already mentioned this. So some of my favorite neighborhoods are like Chelsea. That's actually was one of the first neighborhoods that I moved to when I moved to New York City. And this was back in 2014 when I very, very first moved to New York. During the summer, I was staying in Chelsea. And I liked it. It's like, I like the vibe. It seems just very like calm and very chic. And so yeah, I like the vibe. I like going to Brooklyn. I like going to Flatbush. There are many stores that line both sides of the street that are like African owned or owned by black people. So I like that. I also like Fulton Street in Brooklyn. I like just walking across the Brooklyn Bridge. I like the Village. How can I not mention the Village? Hence the name, right? Like the name kind of speaks for itself, but it does have like this small kind of close-knit community feel to it, even though a lot of people pass through the Village. But it just has like this kind of like warming, welcoming kind of feel in the Village. And there is a restaurant that I like to go to when I go to the Village. What is that shit called? I think it's Manhattan Diner or Village Diner. I think it's on West 4th Street, but I like that restaurant because the guys that work there, the people that own it and the people that work there, they're like really like inviting and cool, and just makes you just feel at home, right? Just they get to know you, you know, and that's, I think, a common thing across New York City. It's just you'll find yourself going to certain stores or restaurants, and the people kind of make a deliberate effort to get to know you. Though New York is such a populous city, right? Over 8 million people live here. But, you know, to offset that, like, they just make it very welcoming, and they get to know you, and they see you as a person, right? And they acknowledge you, you know. And of course one can say, okay, he's doing it to try to get, you know, a tip. But no, you can really feel like that they care, and they really, you know, genuinely, you know, want to get to know you as a person. So I value that at a lot of places I go to. And of course I end up going back there because, you know, of that connection that they make with you. Not just at restaurants, but like even like the bodegas, you know, the local corner stores, like they get to know you. Like I order breakfast, right? There's this place that I go to in my neighborhood here in Upper East Side that I get breakfast from, and they know me, right? I call them, they already know what I want, like that, you know. They're like, oh, you know. And they tell me what my order is before I even say it, just by recognizing my phone number and my voice. And so it's just like little things like that go a long way, right? So yeah, I don't really get a chance to go to the Bronx, but I want to make it, you know, make time out to go to the Bronx more often, because I have lived in the Bronx. So before I moved to LA, I was living in the Bronx with my ex, which is the last guy I dated, you know, last serious relationship that I had. We dated from 2014 to 2017, 3 years, and we were living together out here in the Bronx, in New York, and also when I was in LA. You know, I moved to LA, and he kind of followed me there. So yeah, the Bronx is like its own character. Like obviously every borough has its own unique personality. I like the Bronx though, just down to earth, and I feel like there are people like down to earth all over New York. That's just kind of the way it is. But you notice, like I noticed, and I said this to my colleague, I said, I noticed like the difference in character, right, of the people in Upper East Side where I live. I didn't notice it until you leave, right, and you travel to other neighborhoods, and it's just like, damn, now I noticed it. I didn't notice the uppityness of the character of the neighborhood here. Probably because I fit in so well, right? I don't try to be uppity. It's just, I think it's just like a, what do you want to call it? I don't know, you place high value on yourself, right? You love and appreciate yourself, and you expect and desire and deserve quality things, right? And so that kind of like feeds into a person's, self-concept, how they see themselves and how they see the world, how they interact with the world. And you can tell that difference of the people here in this neighborhood on Upper East Side versus like, I'm on a train and I'm traveling to Brooklyn, Williamsburg. It's just the way that people dress is clearly different. And just like, it's different. More humble, shall I say. Different in that way, seem to be more humble. But, I don't look at like having a high appreciation for oneself as a bad thing, right? Or esteeming yourself to high level. I don't really see that as a bad thing necessarily. But there's so many different places I want to travel to, like, that I haven't touched yet, like uncharted territory here in New York for me. But I'm going to do it. One being taking that walk across the George Washington Bridge from Washington Heights to New Jersey. So, yeah, I definitely want to check that out. And then as far as like travel plans, international travel plans, I definitely plan to go to Africa. Most likely by myself. Unless I fall in love, meet a decent man, and we can go together. That would be, I think, better. As long as we're on the same page. Like, I want to make sure we do everything I want to do. And I feel like in order to ensure that, it's better that I go by myself. Because if I go with someone, well, I think men are usually pretty good with that, right? Like, men just kind of just be chilling, going on with the flow. But it's different if I go with a woman, right? It's just like, I don't want to have that kind of experience where, I want to eat at this place, they want to eat there, and it just kind of messes things up. Like, I'm so used to moving according to how I want to move, because, I've been single for the past 4 years, so not having to consider someone else's opinion or perspective, my perspective is the only perspective that I have to consider when making decisions, like on where I want to eat, or what kind of activities we should do, things like that. I just go and do them. So definitely want to go to Africa. Which country? A lot of people go to West Africa first. That's like their like gateway to Africa. They go to Ghana, Nigeria. Given that I have, friends that are from Gambia, I think that would be nice. They call it the Smiling Coast of Africa. Go to Gambia. So many different places to go. Eritrea, Ethiopia. I heard South Africa is much like the U.S., so what's the point of going to see a place that is just like where you come from? But yeah, Madagascar I heard is interesting. Like a lot of places on the east and west sides of Africa. You don't hear much about Chad. Well then, I'm going to end this video. I'm going to catch you guys later. Feel free to drop your comments below. And if you have any more questions that I did not address here in this video, feel free to email them to me. If I address your question here in this video and you have a follow-up, feel free to also email me. And I will catch you guys in the next one.